Hello, People for Liberty. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the executive director of the People for Liberty. I'm really excited for you guys to join us here today because we have an important Liberty for Lunch Power Hour. I mean, they're all important. I'm happy for the conversations that we have, but we are right now finally on the other side of a true humanitarian disaster. In Texas, when the power went out, people suffered. Some people died. And it shows a huge breakdown in a lot of things that people thought they could rely on. So it's a kind of a special power hour. I am joined, of course, by my partner in all things Liberty, Princess Rivulet. Princess, how's it going?
Hi, Dan. Super excited to be back, as always, day drinking. But it's how you keep the memories away, especially with all the tragedies we've had in recent history.
Interesting. So I will say that, as a person, you can deal with bad things in other ways besides drinking. And I encourage everybody to find their jam.
It sounds like work,
that.
Dan.
But if you do drink, well, and you're holding that glass up, I see it has very good legs.
Yeah, I was surprised because this was only like $20. I buy wine by the box because that's how we deal. But I was really shook to my core about the quality, and they will definitely get my business again because that's how free market capitalism works.
Well, and it's awesome to talk about that because the free market is one of those wonderful things that can always address a lot of crises if it's allowed to. But that's a great transition to bring in the chair of the People for Liberty, our friend Lauren Postler. Hey, Lauren, how's it going?
Hey, y'all. I'm here in Houston, and it's been a rough couple of weeks, but glad to join you both and our Liberty family here on the Power Hour.
So we're thrilled to have you. Let's talk about the fact that this very simple thing that Princess was talking about, the ability to go out and buy a box of wine, that was something you couldn't do a week ago, right?
No. So for those of you who maybe are unfamiliar, I live in Texas, Houston, Texas, and last week we suffered unprecedented winter storms. And it feels like we keep using the word unprecedented, like in every thing we talk about lately, but that was true. And across the state, and Texas is huge, and we have all 7 climate zones like represented in our one state. And across the state, we experienced freezing temperatures for the first time ever in every part of the state. And our infrastructure simply isn't set up to handle that because we're set up to handle 100 degrees heat and humidity and those kinds of environmental factors that we've become accustomed to, that we build our homes for, that we build our roads for, that we build water treatment plants and infrastructure for. We have built our state around the weather and the environment that we have come to know is true over the last hundreds of years. So this unprecedented weather event, ice, wind, storms, hail, and freezing temperatures that lasted, well beyond 2 or 3 days, which is not the norm for us, we simply couldn't handle. And, the opportunity to go get a box of wine at the grocery store, we had no power to grocery stores. We had no ability to keep our refrigerated goods cold. I walked across the street to my Kroger, God bless them, who opened unlimited power. It was like walking into Zombieland Kroger. Lights are flickering. They've only got a couple of the aisles open. I'm afraid some zombie's going to jump out from behind a dark corner. Cans of soup were, all out. There was no bottled water. And it was like, this is the apocalypse. Forget Harvey. Harvey I could handle. Hurricanes I can handle. This was the apocalypse for Houston, for Texas.
So for people who don't know, just Hurricane Harvey was this massive flooding event in Houston 5 years ago, which was also very devastating. Lauren, can you give us a quick chronology of what happened? I think we probably want to start 10 days ago, right? Yeah. 10 days ago, they're like, hey, it might snow. And everybody was excited, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Hey, it might snow. We might get a chance to go outside and make snow angels and play with the kiddos. And I'll say we've had freezing temperatures before. And so, we were alerted to, wrap our outdoor pipes, drip our faucets, and, hoard bottled water because that's what we do. But Dan, you and I were talking about this in terms of, again, the building and the infrastructure. And we had a great conversation about the fact that we have to build above the water table because most of our underlying earth is clay. So again, it's not just that Texans are stupid and we don't know how to, set up infrastructure properly. There are distinct challenges to setting up infrastructure for your environment, right, Dan? We had a good combo about that.
Exactly. One of the things is, people don't understand that, everybody adjusts their environment to what they think it should be, what it's going to be like. So, in places where you get terrible storms, like I grew up in Galveston, Texas, south of there. Galveston has experienced hurricanes. The 1900 hurricane is still the worst disaster in the history of the United States. And as a result, Galveston modified their environment. They built a 17-foot tall seawall that runs the length of the island. And that seawall worked when Hurricane Ike came through and covered the island in 6 feet of water. Because there was a 17-foot tall seawall, the waves didn't roll through and knock all the buildings over like they had during the 1900s. So people build to their environment. In Texas, the panhandle occasionally gets snow. And to be fair, the panhandle wasn't unprepared for the snow.
Correct.
But what happened was, because everybody got freezing temperatures, Brownsville, Texas, which I like to point out to people is further south than Cairo, Egypt, where they have pyramids. Brownsville, Texas was down to 25 degrees. And so people who have houses that are normally built for the 90-degree temperatures and, maybe a 60-degree cool spell, they are cranking up their heater as high as it can possibly go. But because, they don't normally need heat, it's all electrical heat.
Correct.
So everybody is now turning up the electricity to 11, as high as it will go and higher across the entire state. And the state wasn't ready for that.
Yep. And I'll say we can talk about, all of the challenges with ERCOT, which is our Electrical Reliability Council. But, Dan, I think what was most poignant for me, and I think this is something that Sarah Brooke, Princess Riviat, and I really connected on, was the humanitarian aspect of this challenge. And I'll say this, if you are interested in the failure of our electrical grid, if you're interested in more about the infrastructure, we are going to be putting up a blog on our People for Liberty website with some great resources so you can learn more about the infrastructure, the electrical grid, and those, aspects of the challenge. But on Saturday and Sunday last weekend, I had just gotten power back. I still didn't have water, but I went out and I volunteered. I went and volunteered with our Mutual Aid of Houston. And Dan, you and I will talk about mutual aid societies and how that's in alignment with our principles. But I have to say, and I don't want to get too emotional, that seeing that line of people wrapped around the block for 4 blocks out at a private apartment complex because people were collecting donations and handing out donations at a private, place of residence. It just highlighted to me how much we have come to depend on ourselves in crisis. Because it's not the government that saves us, and they have never saved us. Texans have come to depend on ourselves. And I think there was a lot of coverage in the news about Ted Cruz going off to Cancun, and there were other elected officials who also acted like idiots. But, for Texans to come together and say we're Houston strong and we're Texas strong, it's because we've learned to live without the government supporting us, because they don't. And what baffles me is that we keep voting them in. And this is across the board. Ted Cruz may be a Republican, but guess what? Houston and Austin have been held by Democratic governments for over 40 years. 1982 was when we elected in Democratic mayors in the city of Houston, and it has held straight since. So you cannot point a finger at one party or the other. It is the entire two-party system that has failed us.
And in that context, when you look at the idea of Texans looking out for Texans, I haven't lived in Texas since 1994, but I grew up there, and I've talked about this in other places. I still self-identify as a Texan first because of that strong sense of community. Texans, it's hard to find a Texan that doesn't own an article of either Texas clothing or jewelry. There are not other states. I live in Maryland now. And actually Maryland's got some pride, but you can't find women wearing earrings in the shape of the state of Maryland. In Texas, I would say 50% of the women, 50% of the people in the state of Texas own Texas either earrings or belt buckles.
We're proud people. We're proud people, and we're independent people. And Dan, I think that's what, when I think about the characteristics of my own self-identity, my personal identity that I hold most true and sacred, I am a woman of faith. I have a deep, abiding spiritual faith and a connection with my higher power. I'm a servant leader. I'm a social worker. I'm a social worker turned fundraiser. I have dedicated my life to serving others. And the third is I'm a Texan. And I believe in that idea that we do help each other, that we do be a part of a community, and that we're independent. But what baffles me is that we don't vote that way. And I think that's why over the last year, I dropped my conservative Republican roots. And I said, we deserve better, Texas. And we do.
And the thing about it is that when politics gets involved, you can find instances where the government is really good at taking care of one group of people, somebody who they think those people, it's politically wise for me to take care of.
Yes.
And to ignore people who don't matter. And that's the real disaster, because to a politicians, and let's not lump them all in together. There are some politicians who I think are good public servants, but by and large, most politicians only care about three things: getting elected, getting reelected, and getting elected to higher office.
Yes.
And if you're not a person who matters in that equation, they don't really care what you're going to do. Ted Cruz going to Cancun, whatever. There is a reality that a lot of people, unless you are in a very important position or you're in a political demographic that is going to swing the election, you are invisible.
You don't matter. Yep.
And that's a sad thing, because what it means is that no matter what group you're in, okay, you can be in, Libertarian Party is actually a good example of this, because in the last election, the Libertarians were the swing votes in several critical states.
Yes.
So even though they're a small group, right now, Republicans and Democrats are doing a lot to say, how do I get the Libertarian votes? But they're doing nothing to look after their base.
Yes.
They don't care about their own party.
They care about the people. And this is why I founded People for Liberty, because I care about people, not politics.
Right.
And we wanted to put the people first. And when we put the people first, politicians listen.
So let's go back to the chronology a little bit. Okay. We've made it past the forecast. It's going to snow. Now there's a little bit of snow, and like 12 hours in, there wasn't really the indication that everything was going to go to hell yet. When did you start to realize this is about to get bad?
Well, so the interesting thing about when did you realize it was going to get bad? I think that's an interesting question. I think it was like there's just this extended waiting period that I never really understood how bad it was, because I was in this bubble. I was trapped, in my townhome without power for 3 days. And that meant that I wasn't leaving that townhome because I didn't have heat or warmth. And so I'm piling on all of my snowshoes and clothes that I have. My parents are from Michigan. My brother lives in Colorado. So thank God I have some of that gear. But I'm huddled. And this is true of most Houstonians and most Texans, my story is not unique. We are huddled in every layer of clothing that we own under all of our blankets, trying desperately to keep warm. That includes my animals. That includes, for people that are parents, that was including them huddling with their children. Because we did not have another source of heat. We depend on electricity almost exclusively.
Not another source of heat, no electricity, no internet. Really, the phone system lasted.
No phones. Yep.
Right. The phone system lasted as long as your battery was charged.
Exactly.
But once that went out, and here's one of the things about it that has been described to me by a few people, that when there's no power for a long period like that, it's dark.
Yes.
And the night is scary.
Yes.
I have a friend who lives in a tall building in Houston. Elevators weren't running. And there was one night where he's like, I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
But it was the second day. And so the emergency lights weren't working.
Yep.
And so he had to go through the hallway, right, with a headlamp on, and get into the stairs and start walking down the stairs. Yes. And at one point in time, he's on the 14th floor, and he encounters this woman, and she's like, please, just go ahead. Because he scared the shit out of her because she's in the same situation, petrified fright. And he's like, it's the worst feeling that I've ever had because, I didn't do anything wrong, but I made this woman so incredibly afraid. And he said to her, look, I'm just like you.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. I'm happy to walk you somewhere. I'm happy to give you my headlamp so you can go somewhere. Because she was walking down without a headlight. And in the end, she's like, yeah, can you just walk me down to the ground floor? And they walked down together. He made a new friend. And that's Texas in a nutshell.
Texas. But I'll say, this was my Zombieland apocalyptic Kroger. And I'll say this, they aren't supporting people like HEB is. So it was HEB.
Okay.
HEB is another great example, though. So two things I want to touch on there. Dan, you talked about the fear.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. We have been living in extended fear for going on, a year and a half now. Yeah. We have been in fear of a global pandemic. We have been in fear for our lives due to civil unrest. We have been in such an extended state of fear that to have this dumped on top of us was trauma after trauma after trauma. And so wandering mindlessly in the dark was just the visible manifestation of that fear. Come to life. I have no light, no power, no heat, no warmth, none of the basics of survival, no water. Right. I cannot survive right now, and I am scared for my life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, it's a funny thing that people don't realize sometimes how fragile our existence is. But for most people, they don't have an alternate source of water. And water is a critical thing, right? You can't live more than 24 hours. You could live more than 24 hours, but you're going to be in really bad shape if you don't drink in 24 hours.
And ours wasn't clean. So even if you had running water, our water treatment plants had failed because they run on electricity.
Right. And so people are dealing with all these things. And so now we talk about the scenario of, my friend, has the privilege of not having to be too scared because he's a man of privilege with a headlamp, etc. Imagine the reverse scenario of, a person without significant means, but a family and kids that you're taking care of. And there is nothing you can do to get them warm because there's nothing in the house, right? The thing, and here's the thing is that if you're conscious of it, and it's going to be fascinating to see, and this is a terrible calculus, but the most deaths going to come from hypothermia, or are they going to come from carbon monoxide poisoning, where people with the best of intentions said, you know what, we're going to bring our charcoal grill into our garage because we know it's dangerous to bring it into our house, but we're just going to do it there. And at least it'll be warm enough that people can come and get in there, not knowing that even that is dangerous. That is a carbon monoxide poisoning nightmare.
Or running their cars. Dan, you told me when I had a couple of bars and was able to text, you said, is your car outside?
Yeah.
So these basic questions of survival I don't think the rest of the country realized like what kind of fear we were in because we didn't have the most basic needs met.
Right. And just let's get through that too as a quick little thing, public service announcement. Your car is this amazing machine, right? You can turn it on and it generates heat, which will last as long as there's electricity for gasoline to be pumped at the gasoline stations. But your car is incredibly dangerous in an enclosed space. So please never sit in your car in your garage while it's running. And that's exactly what Lauren and I talked about it. I'm like, if your car's out, and so that's my friend who lives in this building, the parking for his apartment building is all underground.
Yeah.
So he wasn't even able to get his car out after he walked all the way down there, walking through this parking garage at night because, he finally gets it turned on, he drives and the door is electric and it won't open.
Yeah. Our gates were shut.
Yep. And so he's sitting there thinking, I actually am about to die because, probably 20 people have had their cars running down here and the parking garage is filled with carbon monoxide. The exhaust fans aren't working. What do I do? And like he said, I can seriously consider like just ditching my car and running out as quickly as I could once I realized what the danger was. He decided not to do that. But one of those crazy things. Sarah, I just want to go to Princess real quick.
I was going to say,
Sarah, we're shocking you with all of this.
I need a rant to get me off my tears.
I can't help you, Lauren, because you made me cry, because like how easy is it to forget what someone else's situation is and then you think about like how you would handle it. Like when you guys were going through your 25-degree freeze, it was -6 degrees in Colorado. So I was like, get the fuck over it. Like I had to buy my dog new shoes just to walk her. But then you forget about the humanity and like people's experience of it. It's like Donald Trump saying he would have run in if he was at the Sandy Hook shooting. Like, no, you don't know what you would do when you're in that situation, when your back's against the wall, when like people are counting on you and you have no idea how the hell you're going to make it through. And then on top of that, it's not like this happened when just like this was just like the worst thing that could have happened. This happened in the middle of the pandemic when like people are already dead and dying, when people have already lost their jobs, when like the safety of their home is the one thing they had to count on, and even that got taken away.
Over your head. Yes.
So like I don't have anything fun, funny, or like informative to say other than like that's awful. That's really awful in that the people that you counted on most, it was like you don't need them every day. And I give Texas a lot of shit because it's fun. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous how much pride and like weight you put on where you were born on the world, because it could have been anywhere. Like God threw a dart at the globe. Like, come on, grow up. Move. Your infrastructure is not good. Move. But like at the same time, you've built a community and a family and like a real sense of just understanding of each other. And like the way the nation interacted was such a stark difference between how Texas interacted, because Texas came together first and was just like, we need to get through this. And people are, shut up, Jay Miles, no Longhorns. Okay. Like that's not any better. But like I don't have anything happy and uplifting to say about that other than like that is libertarianism at its best, at its core, to see people coming out to helping when they can. And like that's what I think we should be highlighting. The silver lining of all this is
bigger than libertarianism, right, Sarah Brooke? You don't care about libertarians. What you care about are the principles of liberty. And I'd say that's where this comes into play. This is bigger than politics. This is bigger than a party. This is about the ideals that we hold dear. Oh God. I'm sorry. I date later, and I'm like, oh God.
Well,
this is bigger than a party.
So, and let me go into that a lot of the objections that people have to our government system right now, that people who of good conscience, and I'm not saying Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, but objection to our system is that the government has abstracted away the idea that we belong to each other, that we are human beings, because we all know the most universal experience is the incredible confusion at what is my life? What am I doing? How baffling is this? And it's that feeling that, there's a point, at least for me, there's a point in time, like the first time I really had that as an adult thought, I thought, my God, I'm incredibly alone. All these other people seem to have all their lives put together. And here I am wondering what my future is going to be. And when you find out everybody else has those same fears and worries, that's the thing that binds us together. And that idea that we're supposed to take care of each other. The saddest thing that I ever heard, any political campaign, I was running at one point in time, and I was talking about there's an opiate death crisis still, but when I was running, it was terrible. And I talked about the fact that, we could make some very simple changes in legalizing cannabis that would allow us to save a lot of lives. And the person said, well, I don't really care about that. That's not my community. And I'm like, do you want these people to die? I mean, don't you want them to be? And they said, that's what I paid taxes for. And I thought, this is the great evil of government, that government has given people absolution to stop caring about each other because they can say, you know what? I contribute to the government, so I don't have to care about my neighbor anymore. The government's responsible for doing that. And in fact, we are meant to be so much more united than we are. And we see it in some spaces when we get to them. Like if you go to your house of worship, you feel that sense of unity. And, if you're a sports fan, there's a time that you can be in a stadium and you feel that sense of unity. But in general, one of the most important things, one of the most important tasks that is given to us, one of the things I like to say is the greatest gift we can ever be given is a call that we can answer. And the call of taking care of our brothers and sisters is an easy one to answer. That has sort of been taken away from us. And it gets even worse because you can go to points where government has deliberately acted to stop people from behaving in a charitable manner, right? Yep. You look at the people in Coral Gables, Florida, where the man was arrested for feeding the homeless in the public square. In Texas, where there was those girls who were trying to sell lemonade, right, to raise money for a charitable thing, and the police shut them down.
Yes.
All these instances, and John's got it right here. That's lovely, John. Just beautiful. And that's what it is. And we're meant to do that. And so now I'm ranting, and I'm going to stop.
No, I think, Dan, this actually comes to, our conversation around mutual aid societies. And again, we'll share more information later about how you can support mutual aid societies here in Texas that are offering direct relief at the ground level. But the concept of caring for one another and the, impetus behind mutual aid societies, that's very much in line with the liberty movement and liberty principles.
Right. I think too that when so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Mutual aid predates the idea of formal government aid in any way, shape, or form.
Yes.
And in fact, in many ways, the idea of insurance on your cars and stuff like that, is based on the idea of mutual aid. You say to yourself, you know what? The chance of me having a car accident, knock on wood, but is so small that I don't necessarily need to worry about it. But if it happened, the devastation would be very large. So why not get together with a pool of people and voluntarily share the risk?
Yes.
And there's so many things that in our lives, if we think about it, we would say, of course, we want to share the risk. And so I'll tell a little bit of a story from my life. I'm a former special education teacher, and some of the kids that I taught, that they were going to be permanently institutionalized. They were just incredibly difficult, and for the parents of those kids, the resources that were available to them, and this is, you can talk whatever we want about the public school system, and I'd like to find some alternative to it, but the resources that were available for these kids were lifesavers for their parents.
Yes.
Not only them, but not only for the kids, but for the parents as well. And the community having that sort of, I've got your back for this thing that we don't know about. And, it's an interesting question because, we talk about, there are a lot of rare illnesses out there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good thing from the very famous Tom Mann. He wants to mutually aid my retirement with a pool of mutual people. It's a good question, Tom, and we'll be getting to that answer relatively soon. We belong to each other and we know it.
Yeah.
Mutual aid societies have been around for a long time. And you actually were just out working with a mutual aid society, right, Lauren?
I've had the privilege of working with probably hundreds of amazing charitable organizations here in Houston and in Texas. Again, as Dan is a recovering special ed teacher, I'm a recovering social worker. And so I think that I've had the opportunity to see some of the best and the brightest when it comes to charitable organizations. And what I love about the mutual aid concept is that it says we don't need government to give us permission to help each other. We don't need to depend on regulations to define how we support one another. We are going to come together as a group of people who care, and then we're going to do everything we can to make a difference. The Mutual Aid Society here in Houston is run by an incredible team of Black, Indigenous, and persons of color who said, we want to do more for our community. And they saw that the private sector and the public sector, so both the private sector, corporations, foundations, and, charitable giving, philanthropy, and then the public sector, including government and public institutions, was not helping enough or weren't listening to the people who they actually were supposed to be serving and doing the job they needed to do. So the concept of mutual aid society were groups that said, we don't need to formalize becoming a charity. We don't need to become a 501c3, a 501c4. We don't need the tax law to define who we are and how we help each other. We're going to come together as a collaborative group to do so. And Dan, as you said, that predates, government in and of itself.
Right. And you could see constant examples of this still going on. One of the great examples of this is the Montgomery Bus Boycott.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where there's
We're in Black History Month. This is so appropriate.
Right, exactly right. And it is, one of there are times I will tell you that I despair for all the hard work that I put in for the Liberty Movement and where we are. And then when I think that, I'm ashamed. I am ashamed because I think of John Lewis and Dr. King and Malcolm X. And did they despair? Maybe. But they kept going. And the Montgomery boycott is a great example of voluntarism making a change in people's lives. And it was mutual aid.
Yes.
These people got together and they said, you know what? It's not just that if the bus system is going to be there, we have to have a carpool system set up. So everybody who's got a car is going to sign up and we're going to drive people around. Unbelievable, right? So we know that mutual aid can work in our current society. The inspiration should be evident to all of us. So then the question becomes, how do people get involved now?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we're going to be sharing both a blog post with more information later, as well as the opportunity to donate to the overarching campaign and to the individual mutual aid societies across Texas. But we also recognize that there are people who need individual help. And so what we have offered or will be offering to our friends at the LP Texas is a way for their members to create their own personal fundraising pages. Dan and Sarah Brooke know this. I was without water for an extended period of time, even after most of the city got it back because of plumbing repairs. And people are desperately trying to overcome now, again, trauma on top of trauma. They lost their jobs. They lost their health. They're scared they might lose their home. They're scared they can't depend or serve their children. And now on top of this, you have outrageous electricity bills and you have plumbing repairs to make and you broke your car's carburetor. I've just heard dozens of horror stories. So at People for Liberty, we're committed to putting together under one campaign umbrella the opportunity for you as people to support other people in a variety of ways through this crisis. And I will admit that was something I intended to have done earlier this morning and yesterday, but every time I sat down to write that blog, I started crying.
But just to let people know, right now, if you want to donate to Texas, peopleforliberty.org/donate. All the donations that come in over the next 24 hours we are putting to mutual aid societies in Texas. We're going to find out, what's going on, and we'll do the due diligence. So, we have people on the ground to say, this is a mutual aid society that's really doing things, handing things out, stuff like that. We have members throughout the state, people who are already working with mutual aids. So if the thing that's been holding you back is, oh, I don't want to give money to, this organization that is just, a front to collect donations, or I don't want to give donations to an organization like the Red Cross with, a huge overhead. We're going to pass everything on to mutual aid societies.
Correct.
And the one other thing we should talk about is that there's a you in that mutual aid. And that you means that you can go down right now and not just, contribute in terms of money. They need help. They need people who are down there. They need people to pass out supplies. Maybe you have something in your house that you can donate. We were talking to a person, Lauren and I were talking to a person the other day who is a phenomenal hostess, legendary parties. And one of the things that happens because she hosts all these parties is that she had cases and cases of bottled water. So she brought them and she donated them to mutual aid societies and to people who needed water. I mean, one of those just amazing things. I don't want to get, we talked about not getting too spiritual in it, but there's this line from, I think it's the New Testament. You guys can tell me it's not. What you did for the least of my brothers, you did for me. And it is that idea that we contribute for everybody, not for one specific person, but knowing that it's important to give because you never know when it's going to be you.
Yes.
And I want to recant that. That's part of my personal growth was realizing that I don't want to say because I could be in there. I just want to give because I want to be a person who gives reflexively. I don't want to give because I think, oh, then it's going to come back to me in some karma sense. I do happen to believe in that karma, but I don't want that to be the thing that motivates me. All right. So we've gone 30 minutes in this. I just want a little station identification. This is my name is Dan Fishman. I'm the executive director of People for Liberty, and this is the Liberty Lunch Power Hour. We talk about instances and things that are going on. And how is it now in Houston? Are you guys recovered, Lauren?
So the funny thing is, this is weather in Texas. It was 80 degrees yesterday and today.
That's shorts weather.
It's short sleeve weather. I was outside sweating, talking to my plumber, trying to get, things fixed. But I'll say, again, for us in Texas, we didn't wait. We didn't wait for the government to support us. We didn't wait for someone to help us. We started helping each other immediately. And because of that, impetus within our communities, we got back to, pandemic normal as quickly as possible. Now, there will still be extended recovery efforts for many people, your plumbing, your electricity, again, some of those infrastructure concerns. But I'm so grateful and proud of all of us. And, Sarah Brooke, your feelings about Texas notwithstanding, I think this is one of the things that you really held as important, supporting people who are coming together to help each other, regardless of their political parties, regardless of their ideologies, coming together because it was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And I know I give you guys shit and I'll never stop, but that's one thing I love about Texas. If you guys ever want to secede, I'll be right there with you. Passing out bottled water when you can't handle the pressure. Oh, that's the last joke I'll make against Texas. But it was incredible to see because you had the government doing exactly what I wanted them to do. And look how it worked out. Ted Cruz literally took a vacation. I only wish he took more people with him and he stayed there longer, because if you're going to be a piece of shit like that and leave in the middle of a fucking natural disaster while people are counting on you, you got to commit. You got to commit to that fuckery, and you better post some shit with you eating bananas with the locals and feeding monkeys and shit, okay? If you're going to be that piece of shit, you got to just go for it. But I think a lot of people, especially in our government, that's where we saw opportunistic.
Yes.
people taking an opportunity to help, even if it wasn't like necessarily the most altruistic motive behind it. Ted Cruz coming back and running that $1 million campaign to say he's not an asshole. Like, bitch, we saw you. Or like AOC coming to raise $5 million, which, like, good for her. It needed to happen. Yeah, good for her. It wasn't her idea. We all know that. Okay. Can we just acknowledge it wasn't her idea? It was her team that came together. And now we're not talking about that she lied at the Capitol building anymore. So, like, there are also like ways that the government goes around and does that. And maybe, Dan, I'm being a bitch because it's AOC and I don't like her.
No, it's okay.
That.
It's okay. But I'll tell you, there's an important thing that I used to say in one of my stump speeches. How radical of an idea is it that we would judge the success of our charitable programs by the results as opposed to how much money we put into them? Mm-hmm. Right? Because right now, government tends to think, well, you know, this is really important and we're spending a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
As opposed to what the results are. And so, you know, AOC and I certainly differ on a lot of things. She raised $5 million for a state and for a city of, you know, people that I love.
I appreciate
and I'm not knocking that. And I'm not knocking that. That's awesome. It was needed. But then also, let's think about why she did it and like what that means for her career and the way it relates to government. Because I think what government does is they have monopolized aid. And now you don't get to help people because they have to help people. And if you are helping people, like, the government's business is relevancy. And if I make myself irrelevant or more relevant within my community, then the government comes in, and that's when they start taking down your lemonade stand. Because if you are helping feed homeless people, there won't be any homeless people. And why the fuck are they taking taxes from you if there's no homeless people, right? So it is in the government's best interest to keep people unemployed and keep people addicted to drugs and keep people not reaching their full potential and aspirations. But like, that's when people come in, because like, I think the way government's taught, especially in our school system, is that it's a thing that you need for you and not that you are the government. Like, why does some asshole 1,000 miles away get to tell you what kind of car you get to drive and how to heat your home? Like, that doesn't make any sense, but we allow it because that's the system we're conditioned into. And we allow it because we think we've let the government convince ourselves that if they don't do it, no one will do it. But we see people trying to do it. And I think that's what we should focus on in every disaster, not just in like the weather storm in Texas, but this pandemic. It's like we saw companies shut down their production of liquor to make hand sanitizer for people in need. And then the FDA comes back and says, you owe us fines for not following regulations. And it's like, what the fuck were you going to do had they not done that? Like, they saved people's lives and then you're going to punish them. And they're punishing them because they've demonstrated that you don't need the government. And that's what this is about. It's trying to convince people you are equipped with everything you need. Like, human beings have taken themselves out of the food chain. We don't need some overarching entity to survive. We've been surviving for years upon years and compounding upon that success and make it fucking amazing. Our cars park themselves. We don't need the government to help us do anything. And like, honestly, I'm just really excited to see like what comes next from the people and not necessarily from our government officials. Like Dan said, trying to win another election, trying to win a higher seat, or trying to appeal to a certain demographic because they want something.
You know, you raise a great point. Most people know the story of the Good Samaritan. Most people don't know that in many states, there are laws called Good Samaritan laws, which essentially says that if you see somebody in need and you try to help them, they can't sue you. Okay. You know, you see somebody in a car that's on fire and you run down there and you try to get them out. Let's say, you know, they get burned in the process and they sue you for not being fast enough. You're protected under the Good Samaritan law. So if you try to do a good deed, you are protected from everybody trying to get retribution except for the government. If you try to do a good deed, the government is allowed to prosecute you if they don't like it and put you in jail.
Where are Good Samaritan laws to protect us from the government?
Yeah.
Is that not like a beautiful thing, though? Is that not like the most perfect system to have? Because think about it. Think about it. When people provide, when it's the people providing, who takes away? The government. But I thought the government was supposed to protect me. So then people are not idiots. They will recognize a pattern of behavior. They will know that when libertarians, big L or little L, come to them and they bring blankets and they bring food and they try to support them with their mental health, the government's the one holding them back from reaching their full potential. People will be able to recognize that. And if you want people to step away from their dependence on the government, you have to break the government's relevancy in people's lives. And we're not doing that if we're going to accept the fact, well, oh, I pay taxes, that's not my community. It's not about your community. It's about the narrative that the government has a control over your life because you need something from them. And how fucking arrogant and disrespectful is it to create situations in which you force people to have to ask you for anything? That is so mean-spirited.
Well, and Sarah Brooke, to your point about patterns of behavior, it is an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
This is Lauren being the social worker here. I got my credits on the wall. This is an abusive relationship that we are in with our state of government. Our government abuses us time and time again, and we keep coming back for more. And I want to know, Texas and America, when are we going to stand up for each other? When are we going to say that my life, my value is worth more than your abuse, and I'm not going to take it anymore? And I'm not going to keep coming back in this abusive relationship and partnership with you, two-party system, duopoly, because I deserve better and I won't live in fear for my life anymore.
You know, Lauren, a two-party system and that abusive relationship is so just a spot-on analogy, because how many times do people say like, oh, we can fix it? No, he's going through a process. We'll just fix it and he'll be better. They're not getting better, babe. And this is not your responsibility to fix. It's not yours. You didn't ask for this. You were born into it. Leave it. Leave. Start something new. Start your own fucking thing. It would be better because like the thing that you start, instead of some white people 249 million years ago started a nation and they expect it to work for you. It's not going to. The America that was started at the revolution is a different fucking America. And like,
go ahead. Your point, Sarah, but think about it as a marriage. We got married to our government X amount of years ago. We got married with the best of intentions. We loved each other. We supported one another. And we thought, you know what, government, you're going to take care of me. You're going to be my spouse and my partner. We are going to live in equality together. Come to find out down the road, wait a minute, this psycho spouse had a history of pathology and all they want to do is dominate in the relationship. They do not want to be equal partners with us as their partner, as their spouse. They want to be an abusive, dominant partner who wants to keep us under their heel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with all this fucking gaslighting going on, oh, we're not out of the pandemic because you won't put on your mask. That's not me, bitch.
What?
You waited too long and now it's too late to enact some mask thing. We need a new strategy and everyone's trying to save fucking face. Where do we find a divorce lawyer? It's in Revolution, Joe. Okay. It's in Revolution. I've already hired her. We're in the works. We're drafting our motions. We're filing our appeals. Okay. Like we're going to revolt against this because I'm not doing it. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm 22 years old and I shouldn't feel this fucking desperate about the state of my nation. And it's because we have Ted Cruz running off gallivanting in Mexico whenever it's fucking convenient. But did anyone miss their check when everyone in the pandemic lost their job? The government officials were the only ones that had job security. And you can't have someone try to fix your problem who can't fathom your experience. They don't know what it's like to wonder how to give their kids a Christmas. Their kids have Christmas. They take vacations to Mexico on a fucking whim because they don't like the weather. I wish I could take a fucking vacation to a new country because I didn't like the weather in my state currently. Like, it's a different breed of people, and we're trying to get them to understand something that's like unfathomable to them. And I think it's just cruel and unusual to have the government exist at all, because there's not a government system in the history of the world that didn't have poverty, that didn't have homelessness, that didn't have racial and like discrimination and sex. Like, it just doesn't exist. These are human nature events, and like tribalism is human nature too. So I get the need to want to have an overarching system that connects us all, but at the same time, we are all different. in our
you
own
brought,
little worlds and pockets.
you brought me out of that time. You did it. You did it.
I might get there
I wanna go
someday.
back
Just give me an hour. I'll do
I want
it.
to go back and touch on one of the things that you talked about earlier about how there's a pattern in an abusive relationship where one party will use fear to
Yes.
keep the other party attached. If you leave me, where are you going to go? Who's going to want you? Who's going to take care of you? All that stuff. When reality, we have the strength within ourselves and we have the ability to form new relationships amongst ourselves. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about mutual aid societies. And, you know, for people, I talked earlier about
beyond the mutual aid societies, Dan, we're talking about the principles of liberty as well.
right, exactly. The right to choose your own destiny,
Yes.
because that is your inalienable right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This idea that we can find our own community and form it, and it doesn't have to be based on force. And that's the other thing about it, is that we're not talking about, most people are involved in voluntary organizations that are committed to taking care of each other.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's your house of worship or it's a mutual aid society, or, you know, it's
It's
There's
club
so
with
many.
down the street.
the
Yeah.
book club. I have to tell you, one friend of mine in League City, which is just south of Texas, we grew up together, went to high school together. He and his friends camped out. One of them had power with a generator, and they played Dungeons and Dragons for a week. So it was a Dungeons and Dragons mutual aid society where they all got together, and that's what they did. But that's what it is. It's whatever is your jam. Those people that you voluntarily associate with, those are going to be the strongest associations that you have. And everybody agrees to do it. And so you don't have the dissent that is built into a system that's built on force.
Fear
Because right now, we're forced to work together.
Yes.
We're forced to say, you know, this is my country. We're forced to this association. Whenever you use a force in a relationship, the relationship's pretty damaged.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, like, on top of that, even if I think it's scary to like enter the world and like you've lived your life in a way where like the government always provided, and now you have to explore this idea where maybe they don't have to. Like, that's a scary thing. But I need people to understand that like you're not alone in that. There are so many people coming to the same conclusions that you have. I've done it, Lauren done it, Dan done it. So like, even if you don't feel like you have the strength to like support yourself at this point in time, moving forward, breaking off ties from the government, there are still people in your community that have more than enough to offer you, that want you a part of their clan, a part of their pack, and they want to take care of you so that you can best take care of yourself. And that sense of community is so important. And especially as we speak about mutual aid, if like the libertarian platform or the ideal of how society should run is we don't need taxes to build our road because mutual aid and like crowdfunding will do it. We have to put our money where our mouth is. So right now we are saying we don't need the government to take care of our citizens. Then let's prove that. Let's take care of our citizens without the government.
Yeah.
That's a great place for us to jump back in, Sarah. So you didn't even plan that, and you did it so well.
I'm a professional.
Really lifted my spirits today. Thank you. So let's talk about some of the things that we have coming up as an organization with People for Liberty. Dan, you and Sarah Brooke have got some great stuff on the calendar. And I do want to show real briefly, I'm wearing my Defund Politician shirt that we
Does
are
that
going to
come
be
in a medium?
It does. So we're going to offer this as part of a fundraiser through People for Liberty. So be on the lookout for upcoming social media posts sharing this and other merchandise where you can show how you feel to the world.
Yeah, that's
on our plate though, Dan. That's not all we got.
well, no, that's not all. We have a bunch of things coming up. You know, one of the things that we did last month, we had a Peaceful Warrior Day.
Yes.
With the idea that we have these communities already of people who are dedicated to peace. And if that's what you want, you have so many natural allies already in the universe. Going out there, finding ways for people to get connected around that, that's a lot of what People for Liberty is for. You know, we want this idea that, you know, We don't want it for anybody. We don't want it like for our organization or anything else. We want it for us together as a people, because the thing we were talking about earlier, where, you can feel alone. Sometimes you can feel alone in the universe. This idea of a voluntary joining of people, these mutual aid societies, the idea that we get together. And you know what? If I lived in Galveston again, if there wasn't flood insurance offered from some other way, I would get together with all the people in Galveston and say, look, our homes are at risk. Let's let's do something. Let's try to make a thing so that, we get together and we each put in $5 a month into a fund. And if the hurricane comes, then we'll take the money out of that to protect ourselves. Most people would say, yeah. The people who didn't do it, they don't have to. They can do whatever they want. But we've had so many examples of that working just fine in the past. Mutual aid societies. The problem with it is, of course, is that, the big thing with government is money and power. And the most lucrative thing for the government is to collect money so that they have power. And they do it under the guise of saying, we're doing this so we can take care of you. That's why you're not allowed to take care of each other anymore, because we have to take care of you.
But think about like all that you can't take care of because the government's taking care of you. Like you spend 50% of your income. I know you don't see it because you don't get it back on your tax return, but it's 50% because you pay your income tax and your state income tax and then your gas tax and your sin tax and then sales tax. So like they're not, and like we have homeless people coming out of our ass still. So at a certain point, like let's change our approach. Like we're still going to help people, but like they aren't doing it. So it falls back on us.
Right.
So Dan, you mentioned Peaceful Warrior Day. Let's talk about the project. And then Sarah Brooke, I want to learn more about the upcoming Pot of Gold as well. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming up.
If I'm involved, there's something happening, and that's like a good thing or a bad thing. My FBI agent hates it for sure. Like he's working overtime, hasn't seen his family in months. But hey, Fred, how you doing? Hope you're doing well. Close my tabs when you're done, by the way. Yeah, so we're going to have a Thanksgiving. No, that's not right. That's the wrong St. Patrick's Day. Thank you. See how cultural? I'm just so cultured. A St. Patrick's Day event on Saturday the 13th, highlighting different perspectives and initiatives in the drug war. So we're calling it Pot of Gold. I thought that was like super clever. And you guys should tune in. It'd be like really fun. We have a lot of big name guests and a meme contest. And if you guys know me, you know I'm excited about that. I didn't get to enter though, so it's fine. I don't know. I'm bitter about it. I would dominate that, and you guys know it.
Dan, what else do we have coming up?
Well, so Monday we have an interview with Dan Berman on Liberty Lunch Power Hour, who, a fellow Texan who you might know, on Saturday was giving out insulin, selling insulin for $12 on the Capitol grounds. It was insulin that had been made in the United States, so passed all sorts of rigorous testing, but then was shipped to be sold in Mexico. Somehow we don't know how it happened, but that insulin made it back unopened to America to be sold. And actually, it goes to an excellent point, though, that one of the things that happened with the power out, if you're a diabetic, insulin has to be refrigerated. Yeah. People who had all this stuff in their refrigerators had to go down and put their insulin in the snow.
Wait, and what about everyone on like a generator at the hospitals? That like,
or people who had their own home care that depended on electricity as well.
Yep.
Yeah. There'll be more in my blog about.
Oh my God. Like so many people just died.
So many.
Oh my God. Like you think it's just the cold, but it's not just the cold, because you got to think about everyone on life support who just like went out for a second till the generators kicked in. It's everyone who can't refrigerate their food, and people who can't refrigerate their insulin. It's just like, it compounds.
I will say,
like on a respirator because they already have COVID and they're starving to death. This is tragic. This is just tragic.
I will say that Houston Medical Center is well prepared for this, and that they did a couple of clever things. Unfortunately, they learned through catastrophe, but they put all the generators on the roofs of their building. So they don't flood out, and so that they can have diesel flown in by helicopter.
Yep.
Not,
to your point, Sarah Brooke. Yes.
The market's not Jesus, but it will provide. Okay.
yeah.
All right. So Dan, we're talking to Dan next Monday. What else?
We also have on Tuesday, Nicholas Sarwark, former chair of the Libertarian Party, who's now running the Libertarian Policy Institute. They are focused on identifying libertarian legislation that anybody can pass. Simple things like, there's a lot of laws that are in existence right now that have been around for forever that are ridiculous. Finding ways to identify them, finding taxes that don't make sense anymore, and eliminating those things from law. And so Nick is advising politicians around the country on how to make their smaller offices, their small offices have big impact. Get rid of a tax here.
Sarah Brooke, you're also talking to my friend Brian, who sent the mariachis to Ted Cruz next week.
Oh yeah, if you guys didn't see that on, I think a lot of talk shows did it. Somebody sent a mariachi band to Ted Cruz's house after he got back from Mexico, and we're going to talk to the people that orchestrated that plan for a quick 30 minutes. I think it's going to be really fun.
So Dan, where can everyone find out about these exciting initiatives and how to keep up with us?
So the easiest thing to do, go to peopleforliberty.org, sign up for our newsletter. You'll get a pop-up right away saying, hey, sign up, et cetera, et cetera. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We are at People for Liberty in like every place that you can imagine. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
YouTube.
YouTube, all of those things. Please, right now, if you're watching us on YouTube, and I can see that there's about 25 people watching us on YouTube, click that subscribe button. I think the word the kids use is mash that subscribe button.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
No?
We don't say that. No.
You're not a kid, Princess. You're too old now.
Oh, okay. Okay, boomer. Okay, boomer. I got aged by boomer. Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it. You're an expert on being too old.
Good point. We actually, we are also at People for Liberty on TikTok, and we actually just had a meeting last night about our TikTok strategy. So we're going to be rolling out some really exciting stuff on TikTok soon.
And those young people.
Exactly. Well, pretty much our TikTok feed is going to be me reading cookbook recipes.
Dan jokes, not dad jokes. They're Dan jokes.
Dan, write a book of your Dan jokes, okay? And then whenever we have a convention and I run out of stuff to say, I can just pull this little book out of my purse and be like, guess what Dan Fishman said?
Well, it's funny. So I'll tell a little story here. It's not a joke, but so my mother was a librarian. And, as a child, I resented that tremendously because we weren't allowed to watch television. I can only watch 2 hours of television a week. And we had to go to the library every week and check out 5 books and read them. And so, but one of the things that I did was I checked out joke books. And so I would read all these stupid joke books. And, that's the great thing about it. My mom, she didn't recognize herself for the voluntarist that she was, but she's like, if that's the book you want to check out, it is a book in the library. It counts as a book. And so like, I always thought I was pulling one over on her because I would check out like Tintin books and comic books and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm cheating. I'm reading books I like.
Dan, we're going to catch up on this. Did you love Pogo?
I do. We have met the enemy and he is us.
I was going to say, I think we're going to revive, for People for Liberty, we've talked about reviving some of those classic political cartoons, but I do have to step out. I want to say to everyone, if you are in Texas, connect with me. I'm Lauren at peopleforliberty.org. That is my email. We want to hear from you. We want to share your stories. If you have a need and you'd like to create your own fundraising page under our umbrella, we'd like to help you do that. And, if you want to do something about the duopoly, consider voting differently, consider supporting different campaigns. And if you got the chops, run for office. 2022, which is next year, is midterms. If you're interested in running in Texas, let's talk. I'll connect you with the right people. But regardless of your political identity, I hope that we can all agree that the opportunity to support one another through mutual aid, through your house of worship, and through other venues is something we can all agree upon is needed and necessary. So thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thanks,
And there's no
Lauren.
time like the present. Thanks, guys. We've gone a little bit over. Princess, any last things you want to say?
I had a lot of fun. I love you guys. The important thing to remember is being healthy is just the slowest rate in which you can die. So if you could day drink, just day drink. Like what's the difference?
Fair enough. And so the last thing I'll say, my name is Dan Fishman. I am the executive director of the People for Liberty. We're an organization that believes that everybody should be committed to this basic idea that is our birthright. It is obvious to anybody who thinks about it, that freedom is our birthright. And the only thing that impedes our freedom is groups of people saying, no, you can't do that. Be free. I'm not asking you to join a political party. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm asking you to stand up for the idea that people deserve to be free. Our website is peopleforliberty.org. If you want to donate something to mutual aid societies in Texas, everything donated to our site in the next 24 hours, we will pass straight through to People for Liberty. Good night, everybody, or afternoon.